Good morning once again. A warm welcome to everyone. We've got about 110 participants in the meeting. I think we are good to go. My name is Jaap de Visser. I am the director of the Dalla Omar Institute, and the Dalla Omar Institute, together with the International Budget Partnership and the South African Local Government Association, is organizing this meeting. Many thanks to all of you for joining in. It's been amazing to see the response. Close to 300 people indicating interest in this meeting, so that's really encouraging. I'll talk a bit more about the plan and the content of the meeting, but maybe just quickly a few house rules to organize this meeting. So we deliberately chose to do this as a Zoom meeting and not as a Zoom webinar, which means we are all in this meeting together and we can all see each other, which is nice because it creates a bit of a community and we can see who else is in the meeting. But I think it does mean that we all need to be a little bit disciplined in terms of how we conduct ourselves in this online platform. So I'm going to ask everyone to keep themselves on mute, and so that we minimize the background noise, and also keep the video off, so that we minimize the data usage and we avoid eating up people's data. So please switch off your cameras, and once you are speaking, feel free to switch it on. That's fine, but while you are listening to the meeting, keep your cameras off. Use the chat box to comment. The chat box is on your right-hand side. You can click on chat box and see what people are commenting and make your own comments and be part of the meeting and make contributions to the conversation. I know there is a chime in the background. Every time somebody joins a meeting, there is a little bell, which is great, but also slightly distracting, but that's fine. That will disappear once the meeting gets going. And I don't think we can really switch that off at the moment. So please bear with us. That's just people coming in and, and leaving the meeting. Also, one practical tip is you can fix your name and maybe make sure that you have a proper name on your little profile. Some of you are named admin or XXX, and that's fine, but we would like to see who you are. So if you go onto your name, and you can rename yourself and maybe put the proper name, that we can then see who you are. That would I think helps us all to have a sense of who is in the meeting. I have a number of colleagues also in the meeting with me who are helping me to manage the logistics in the background. Dr. Tinas Chigwata and Ms. Valma Hendricks and Ms. Mandy Cupido. They are also in this meeting, and they will also sort of act a little bit as invigilators and switch off your cameras if you have it on accidentally. So don't be offended if somebody asks you to switch off your camera or you get a little notification. We have a lot of people in this meeting, so we're just trying to manage it all accordingly. So that is a little bit by way of house rules. We also have a hashtag. It's in the chat box right at the top. Hashtag ASCIVICELANE or hashtag COVID budgets. If you want to tweet about what we're doing here, feel free to do so and use the two hashtags provided there. So that is with regard to so let me then just say a little bit about the project that this seminar is part of. As I indicated, we're doing this project together with the International Budget Partnership, and we often collaborate with the South African Local Government Association. And for this particular webinar, we collaborated intensively with the South African Local Government Association to co-host this meeting. The broader project that we're busy with is a series of webinars dealing with the impact of COVID-19 on municipal governance, municipal budgeting, municipal finance, with a focus on transparency and public participation. We will therefore have a number of these webinars looking at various aspects of the impact of COVID-19, the pandemic, and the lockdown, economic consequences on municipal budgeting with a focus on transparency. And I think maybe this is the right time to just ask our partner, the International Budget Partnership, in particular, Mr. Albert van Zyl, who is in the meeting, to maybe just say a few words from his perspective. Albert, are you online? And maybe you can switch on your camera and say a few things. Over to you, Albert.
Great, thank you, Jaap. I was just waiting for permission to do the video and audio, so I'm obeying the rules. Great, thank you. Very, very good to have all of you with us this morning. It's cold, we're all busy, and you braved both of those to be with us, so thank you. We hope we can provide a warm atmosphere at least. So my daughter told me many years ago, one day she came back from school and she said to me, Dad, did you know that you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar? Along those same lines, we think that perhaps sometimes the accountability debate in South Africa focuses a bit too much on trying to catch government doing something wrong. So one of the ideas in this webinar series is for us to try and catch government doing something right. And the reason for that is not just to be nice, but it is also to try and promote some of the good practices. So that's the reason why this morning we've invited 3 people that have innovated in the space of responsive government during the lockdown, so that we can promote those good practices. You will agree with me that during the lockdown, responsive government is even more important than it was before. So during this period, because of job losses and because of the slowing economy, especially poor people are more dependent on government than was the case before. So it is even more important that we get the two-way line of communication between government and especially poor people functioning as best we can. Let me also say that this is part of our ongoing Asivikelani campaign. You'll hear a little bit more about that later from Nontando Gamlama of AFIS's core plan. Also from our side, Jaap, thank you very much to you and your team at the Dula Oma Institute and to Salga for partnering with us on this initiative. And thank you very much also to the donors that pay the rent, the Wraith Foundation, particularly Luminate, OSF South Africa, and the EU delegation to South Africa. So thank you very much, welcome, and really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you, Jaap.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Albert. Let me go straight into the next conversation. Thanks very much for that introduction. I think that really sets the scene for what we are doing this morning. So this morning, we want to focus specifically on municipal budgeting and public participation in municipal budgeting. We want to focus on 2 themes, as we indicated in our invite. The first theme is municipalities were thrust into a last phase of their budgeting process, having to do this under a COVID-19 scenario, under a lockdown, with not being able to have any physical community meetings. What was the impact, and how did municipalities respond to this? And what were some of the innovations that were developed by municipalities to still reach out to communities, particularly marginalized communities, for input into the budget? The second theme is, of course, because of the COVID-19 lockdown measures, municipal councils couldn't function as per normal, and in fact couldn't have physical meetings. So municipal councils had to resort to exactly what we're doing here this morning, namely virtual meetings, to conduct their business, and importantly, to pass this 2020-21 budget, which was due to be passed in this particular period. And that's obviously critically important, because it is during those council engagements that councillors engage with the budget on behalf of their constituencies, on behalf of their political parties, even if they hadn't been involved in the drafting and the preparation of those budgets. So the overall theme of transparency and engagement with municipal budgets during this difficult time, during this time when it is so important for engagement to happen with the budget. What were the innovations? What were the best practices? What were the challenges? How did it go? What worked and what did not work? And then we also want to hear from civil society, as Albert indicated. How do they see it? How does civil society see these efforts by local government to respond to the crisis in ways that still ensure public participation and transparency? And we'll reach out in particular, as Albert indicated, to Ms. Nontando Namlana from Ephesus Core Plan in the Eastern Cape, just to kick us off with that conversation after the panel discussion. So on the program, we have a few speakers. We'll first hear briefly from Dr. Tinashe Chigwata, who is senior researcher in the Dalla Omar Institute, and together with me, we wrote a background piece setting out the legal framework and some of the policy questions around budgeting under COVID-19, just to get us all on the same page in terms of what are some of the legal and policy questions. And then we'll go straight into our panel, and we have Councillor Kelvin Johnson from the JB Marks municipality in the Northwest, who will tell us how his municipality coped with these challenges. We'll then go over to Ms. Malebogo Motsoaledi. She is the Chief Financial Officer of Magareng municipality in the Northern Cape, to hear from her perspective how that municipality engaged with these issues. And then we'll switch to Mr. Nathan Fisher, who works in the public participation to hear from the city of Cape Town how they, as a big metropolitan municipality, coped with public participation in municipal budgeting. And after that, we'll open the floor for inputs and comments. And just to reiterate, this is not a meeting just of the panelists. It is a meeting where we're all in this together. We also want to really hear from other participants, from municipalities, how they have managed to respond to these constraints and these difficulties, and how they managed to innovate during this unusual time. And of course, we want to really hear also from civil society and also opposition parties, how all of this went down, and what was good and what was not so good, so that we can hopefully learn from this going forward. So maybe with those remarks, can I then switch to Tinashe, Dr. Chigwata, my colleague, who will just take us through some of the legal questions and policy questions as a way of background to this discussion. So over to you, Tinashe.
Thanks, Prof. But maybe it's just useful for me to share the piece those for the benefit of those that did not manage to access it. And I hope everyone can see my screen. So the piece, as Professor Yap mentioned, relates to municipal budgeting and planning during COVID-19. In this piece, we try to provide an overview of the legislative framework that regulates municipal budgeting and planning. And the important part of that we are trying, the important point that we are trying to bring out in this piece is the fact that the circumstances under which municipal budgeting and planning is taking place has changed a little bit, even though there is an established legislative framework that provides that. And the important question is, how do those changes affect community participation and transparency? So that's what we try to cover in this piece. The critical point, I think, to start with is that we, as we are all might be aware, that municipalities are required to consider their budgets by at least 30 May. And if there is no budget by the 1st of July, the province or provinces are required to intervene to make sure that the budget is adopted. So to ensure that the budget is adopted on time, there's quite a number of processes that must take place well ahead, but March and May are important months in the municipal calendars when it comes to adoption of budgets and review of IDPs. And this also happened to be the same time when COVID-19 hit the shores of Africa. South Africa, most municipalities were already, intensifying their efforts towards the adoption of these budgets. Now, the measures that the government adopted to contain the virus, including the lockdown, which made it almost impossible for municipalities to continue with these processes. For instance, municipal councils could not hold meetings, and other municipal governance processes could not continue. As a recognition to the changed circumstances, the National Treasury issued an exemption notice under which municipalities were allowed to report some of the things that would have otherwise been undertaken during the period of national disaster to be reported after 30 days after the period of the national disaster. Importantly, there was the requirement that municipalities were given the leeway to adopt special adjustment budgets to make provision for COVID-19 related expenditure. However, there were no similar exemption in terms of the Municipal Systems Act. And the key question is, what is the implication of this? This essentially meant that municipalities were still required to comply with the Municipal Systems Act, in particular public participation and consultation applicable to the IDP review and budget processes. With the easing of the lockdown in May, the disaster legal regime has been relaxed to allow municipalities to adopt their budgets, among other things. The key change here is that of the replacement of contact sessions or consultations with alternative methods of consulting municipalities. How did this happen? How were the voices of different corners of the communities heard during this process of IDP review? Another significant change is that, which is now, I think, become part of the new normal, is the replacement of contact meetings with virtual meetings in municipal councils. Running virtual meetings, as we might all attest, is that it is not an easy process and requires some adjustments. But more importantly, on the substantive aspect of it, is that the rules and orders of councils governing meetings had to be adjusted to make provision for these online meetings and sittings. In Sauga, I think, came on board to develop a set of generic rules for online and sittings for consideration and adjustment by and adoption by municipal councils. And this meant that from the second half of May, most municipalities held their first ever virtual meetings. And these virtual meetings dealt with critical issues which relates to the adoption of IDPs. What does this new way of conducting council meetings and sittings mean for transparency and public participation in local government? The legislation is very clear. Municipalities must be transparent about their meetings and allow public admission into their meetings. There is no doubt that virtual meetings or virtual council meetings were a necessary or are a necessary innovation to counter the challenges presented by COVID-19. But what are some of the opportunities and challenges that comes with hosting virtual meetings? How do they open or close the door for local democracy? And what are some of the innovative ways of enabling and promoting community participation and transparency which can be shared across municipalities? And some of this innovation taken forward to the post-COVID-19 phase? These are some of the questions that local government practitioners and those that are interested in local government are raising at the present moment. In conclusion, COVID-19 pandemic and the measures implemented to contain it are testing the ability of municipalities to comply with the rules and principles for transparency, participation, and oversight applicable to planning and budgeting. How have municipalities responded or adjusted to the quick and changing environment during COVID times whilst ensuring transparent and community participation in the planning and budgeting process? This is the last question that I will leave with the audience that I hope we'll be able to untangle in this webinar. Thank you. And apologies for the, I think, poor sound connection.
Thank you, Tanash. Thanks very much for that overview. I hope that gave you a bit of a sense of what are some of the legal issues and questions in the background. Again, apologies for the sound quality. I hope you were able to follow the most of it. This was a small article that we posted on the internet and was also made part of your invite. So we will share the link again in the chat box, so you can also read this piece at your own leisure. So with that, of course, the question becomes, how did this work in practice? What happened over the last 2 months in municipalities having to adjust to this new and unusual situation? And we're now very pleased to be able to reach out to our panel. And let's start with Councillor Calvin Johnson. He is the councillor responsible for financial matters in the JB Marks municipality in the Northwest. Warm welcome to you, Councillor Johnson, and over to you. I see you have your video on, and you can unmute yourself and you have the floor. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. It's indeed a great pleasure to be on this platform of all of you. Thank you very much for making time to discuss this very, very important issues. Yes, indeed, it's quite an exciting time in the lives of municipalities. It is something that came into our beings, into our lives, and we never expected it to happen. And I can also confirm that indeed COVID-19 pandemic has changed our lives forever. Things will never ever be the same again. And indeed, you are completely correct to say we had to think on our feet.
I also seem to have lost the audio. Am I still audible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes, you are, yeah.
Okay, so it seems we've lost Councillor Johnson. I wonder if we can wait a few seconds to see if he comes back, but it looks like his connection is just gone for the moment. So what we can maybe do is go to the next speaker, and maybe we can come back to Councillor Johnson, because I don't think he is with us. I don't think he's on mute, because he is not on mute. So I think the screen has just frozen, and it seems that we've lost the connection with Councillor Johnson. Okay, so Ms. Motswaledi, are you in the meeting, and could we perhaps go straight over to you and hear from your municipality, Magareng municipality in the Northern Cape, where Ms. Motswaledi is the Chief Financial Officer, and to perhaps hear from that municipality. I don't see Ms. Motswaledi, but I was told she is in the meeting and with us. So I'm just waiting for her to take the floor, unmute herself, and maybe switch on her video if she can, or otherwise just unmute herself, and the floor is yours, Ms. Motswaledi.
Good morning, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, perfectly, loud and clear.
No, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Malebo Motswaledi. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Magareng Local Municipality in the Francis Barra District Municipality. Magareng Municipality is a small municipality situated in Warrenton, with about plus minus 80 kilos from Kimberley town. What I would like to indicate to the House is that my apology for my video is inactive. That is why you can't see me, but I hope you can hear me. Just to give an overview, and what I would like to bring to the attention of the House is that my presentation covered both the topics. And then my overview is that on the 23rd of March 2020, when the President of the Republic of South Africa announced the first lockdown, municipalities, they were busy finalizing the draft budget for the 2021 financial year. We were all shocked as the residents of South Africa with the news of the pandemic that have affected our country. Yes, we did hear about the COVID-19 that China and claiming many lives, but little did we know that one day as South Africa, we will be faced with the same pandemic. As per the legislations, the draft budget of the municipalities must be adopted by the council on the 31st of March for every year. And then the final budget must be adopted by the council on the 31st of May of each year. The process after the lockdown have been announced, but prior to the lockdown, firstly, let me start there. Prior to the lockdown being announced, the municipality, when we were busy compiling the draft budget, we had several budget steering engagements, and then both the management and councillors, they were taken through, and then they were given a fair chance to make their inputs to the draft budget. So the process with regard to the draft budget was followed to the latter, but only by management and councillors, as we all know that it will be taken for public participation after it has been adopted. But unfortunately, prior to that, the adoption, that's where the lockdown was announced. So as the municipality, the process that we followed was that for us to compile the final budget, the process that we followed was that we used those inputs that we received from management and councillors through those engagements that we had with them before the lockdown. And then management were given an opportunity to revise their inputs with regard, especially with regards to the new appointments that they wanted to make. And then what we did for both the IDP and the budget, the 1920 financial year priorities were used as a baseline. And then we communicated with the ward councillors and committee members as they have a responsibility to form part of the process. So they conducted a door-to-door campaign so that communities are given chance to make priorities, to make inputs to their priorities. But unfortunately for the budget, it was very difficult for the municipality to use that route. As we all know that the budget is a technical thing. It needs to be, it needs to be tabled. It needs to be, when we present it, we need to explain in more details to the participants. But unfortunately with that, we couldn't use the door-to-door campaign. We only used it for the IDP process. And then for the IDP, at least not all community members were reached. Only few were reached, but they managed to prioritize for their wards. And then the inputs that we received from the community was used to compile the final IDP. And then the evidence for that is that the attendance register were compiled for those door-to-door campaigns. And then the advert, we placed an advert in both the website and the newspaper for the IDP and the budget. And then the challenges that we've encountered as the municipality was that not all sorry for the delay. The challenges that we encountered was that not all the community members, the stakeholders were reached. And then the municipality, in a nutshell, the municipality did not comply with the regulations with regards to the public participations. And then not all stakeholders were given a fair chance to make inputs to both the draft IDP and the budget, of which at the end we are going to have unrealistic budget and the IDP for the 2021 financial year. And then this might, I'm not saying it has to happen. I pray that it mustn't happen. Maybe we might encounter protest by the community in the next financial year because their inputs were not addressed. And then as a municipality, for the meetings we were forced, as we were advised, not forced, as we were advised to utilize the visual connections, we use the Zoom to conduct the council meetings, the portfolio committee and the portfolio committee meetings. But we have encountered some challenges with regard to the poor connectivity due to the network coverage. And then the municipality did not have the financial muscle to cater for the data costs. So that is why the public participations with the communities were not held, because we, as the municipality, we had to provide them with the data in order for them to be able to participate. The new innovation that we used, it has the time restrictions, like the Zoom that by the time that we were using, because it was new to us, it has the time restrictions of about 30 minutes. And then the other challenge that we've encountered with regard to the virtual meetings was that a training is needed for end users. Not all of us knows how to use the new technology. And transparency was compromised. And then it has the limited information sharing. And then the benefits for the virtual meetings, which was perfect for the social distancing, as it is one of the requirements for the COVID-19. And then it is convenient, and then users can connect everywhere, anywhere, and then it saves the office space, and then it's easy for setup. What we have identified as a municipality going forward with regard to the virtual meetings and was that we need more capital investment for the ICT unit, the Information and Communication Technology unit. And then we need to appoint more skilled personnel in the ICT unit.
Have we now also lost Ms. Motswaledi? I can't hear her any longer. Am I still audible?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Motswaledi, are you still with us? All right. It seems that we've unfortunately also lost Ms. Motswaledi. However, Councillor Johnson is back with us, I've been told. Councillor Johnson, are you online? Are you with us?
Well, I'm online, Chairperson. I'm online and I'm happy to be back. Can I proceed?
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you very much. Indeed, one of the issues that was highlighted from Tanasha's presentation is that we must present our annual budgets to the provincial treasury and to national treasury. That is one of the legal requirements. And I can confirm that indeed, as a municipality, we are in constant contact with the provincial treasury, including national treasury. We are also facilitating your budget engagement sessions where we sit with provincial treasury, COCTA national, COCTA provincial, and all other stakeholders relevant to the budget process, and where we engage on these budget processes. Indeed, yesterday we had two very successful sessions with Greater Taung Municipality, as well as Dr. Kenneth Kaunda Municipality. And as JB marks, we will be on the 10th of June engaging with MEC Rosho, who is doing a sterling job in terms of making sure that our budget are cash funded, our budget are submitted in terms of what the rules and regulations require. With regard to public participation, what we have done is we have published our municipal budget on the municipality Facebook page, and we have provided the community up to the 18th of June an opportunity to participate, to provide comments, inputs, and for consideration by the executive mayor. And that process is ongoing now. It's an open process where everybody can participate in the budget process. In addition to that, our executive mayor has also gone on local radio community stations where he engage on the budget process with the community. We are trying our utmost best to reach as much people that we can possibly reach. We are doing our utmost best to ensure that there is broader consultation with the community. And indeed, we want to encourage, especially the young people who is much more into the social media space. We want to encourage that constituency to participate meaningful into our budget processes. That is one of the challenge that we have experienced in the past, that young people who's much more on social media do not necessarily participate in our public participation, open meetings where we invite them. Now is the ideal opportunity for them to meaningful participate. In addition to that measures, we also have a dedicated email line that is monitored by a team from communications unit constantly, where people can also input, comment, and put any additions for consideration by the executive mayor. That dedicated email line, it's widely published, and we encourage our constituencies to please make use of that. With regard to the specific document that we have tabled on the social media, we have two versions available. We have put a full budget with all your schedule A, schedule, everything there. That specific budget will not necessarily be interpreted and be understood by everybody. What we have done is we have put a simplified version in addition to that specific budget, also on the website, where people can simply see in a two, 3 page where there's no graphs, nothing, just simple. This is a simplified budget. This is how it works. This is the type of money that goes into project. This is the type of money that goes into IDP activities, projects, everything, where the layman can interpret and see and understand the budget. So there's two versions available on our website. In addition to that, we also encourage our various caucuses within the council meeting to convene their caucus meeting, of course, in line with the COVID regulations, and to interrogate the budget and to input and comment on the specific budget. I must say that with the COVID pandemic, we have agreed that we must not go beyond the 6% in terms of tax and rates and taxes. We are not going beyond an increase of 6%, simply for one reason, is that we want to make sure that there's affordability purposes, and people must be in a position to can afford it. We want to stay within the CPI Consumer Price Index, which varies between 3 and 6%. But I must confirm that except for electricity, because that is a regulated matter, and NERSA as the energy regulator will guide us on that. So that specific matter, we will wait for further instructions from NERSA. But I can also confirm that last year we did not go beyond 6% as well with electricity, because you are allowed as a municipality to go beyond 6%. However, then you must motivate and come up with reasons why you want to go over that. So we thought as a municipality, we are not going to go beyond that. We will stick to the 6%. We also had our first virtual meeting where we facilitate a full council sitting. And as I said, initially there was some challenges that we experienced. We were supposed to start 9 o'clock, and eventually we settled for Zoom, and we started 2 o'clock. However, I want to slightly differ with the perception that it's only available for 30 to 40 minutes, because we had a full 8 hours available for Zoom, and it went extremely efficient. It went beautiful. We could participate, meaningful, and we had almost 6 venues where various councillors were allocated. We had the Clockway region where we had 3 caucus rooms plus the chamber, including various councillors sitting in the comfort of their own homes, connecting to the system and inputting. We also had a full complement of councillors sitting in the Ventersdorp region, some 50 to 60 kilometers away from the head offices this side, and they participated meaningful, and our meeting went extremely well. The reason why we had our doubts, it's because of what happened in the past where Zoom was infiltrated and all sorts of negative and funny materials was distributed on Zoom. But we did not have any challenges with regard to that specific issue. And we could manage to sit and meaningful engage on the budget process. The lessons learned is that there's a definite need for us to upgrade and advance our technology IT systems. That is a definite need. And that is something that municipalities across the country must seriously consider, and they must invest adequately in the IT systems, because this is here to stay and it's not going to go away very soon. The concept of virtual meetings are now part of us. And as a sector in local government, we need to fully embrace this specific concept, and we need to up our game in terms of the tools of trade for councillors, backed up by the relevant training to ensure that a seamless flow of processes and meeting procedures are in the order of the day and it's in place. There's also, I must confirm that there's also advantages to this concept. There's less traveling. We spend less time in meetings, and there's also less time for logistical arrangements. It's a simple concept. You invest in a sound system and video system, you integrate it, and voila, you on the platform and you can meaningfully engage. There's no catering involved. There's no all other unrelated costs with regard to meetings that used to be in. They are completely something of the past. But I must also acknowledge that indeed not all municipalities have the relevant or necessary infrastructure to, like media centers, to give effect to this wonderful concept. And they must be innovative, and part of their COVID-19 budget adjustment processes must cater for this specific aspect, and municipalities must seriously consider infusing it into their budget systems, where we can budget for it and make sure that it's now part of our daily operations. What else is there? Yeah, that is basically what I can share with the panel, and I hope and trust that everybody is still there. Prof, yeah?
Yes, we are here. We are here. We've been listening intently.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. That was a great comeback.
Yes,
We lost you for a few minutes, but you made a good comeback. So
I'm
fantastic.
happy.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think that was a realistic, but yeah, slightly more positive perspective coming from you. I think that's encouraging, but also acknowledging that this requires investment
Yes,
in capacity and in infrastructure, and we learn as we go.
of course.
I see a lot of comments already coming through on the chat. Some concerns, some critique, some encouragement. So I'll try to bring some of that back into the debates after the next speaker. But please keep them coming. It's very useful to keep an eye on the chat and see what people are contributing. The last person that we want to hear from is Nathan Fisher from the city of Cape Town. Of course, an entirely different context, one of our largest cities, arguably well endowed in infrastructure and capacity for IT systems. One would expect there to be a lot of that present, but also huge challenges in terms of population density and the complexity of running a city administration. So we've got Nathan Fisher, who will give us an overview of the city of Cape Town's experiences. I have not yet seen Ms. Motsoaledi coming back. She may still be struggling to come back. So I suggest we go to Mr. Fisher and ask him to make his inputs, and after that we'll continue the discussion. Nathan, over to you.
Good day, everybody. Thank you, Professor De Visser. So public participation in the city is quite interesting for the mere fact that over the years, I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. Let me just confirm that you can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. And so
We can
public
hear you.
participation in the city, like I said, is quite interesting. We've developed a lot over the years, starting back in the day when public participation, when I joined the public participation, it was a very traditional approach where we used to go out and there was no real engagement, no real consultation with the public. And so it was very legislatively driven, which we refer to as a compliance-based approach. Communities refer to it as a tick box exercise. And a lot of people that live in Cape Town will recall them constantly criticizing the city for having this tick box exercise approach for public participation. And that basically meant that we would publish our processes through a legislative approach, which was based on Chapter 21A and 21B. And that meant that we will just ensure that we have it in the newspapers. We would distribute the document to sub-councils and libraries. We'll put it on the council's website, and we will have it not just for viewing at the sub-council, but we will have it there for as a notice going out, and then obviously we'll advertise it. And so that was the requirements. That is the requirements based on Section 21A and 21B of Chapter 4 of the Local Municipal Systems Act. And so for all public participation, that's generally the minimum requirement, unless there's other legislation that says that we need to go beyond that. And so public participation got a lot of criticism for initiating processes which were based on these legislation, and also the tick box exercise, where we put it out for public participation, but the communities don't really understand or have access to the document. And over the years, we've tried to amend it. We've tried to work it. With recent years, we've hosted 24 sub-council meetings. So the city of Cape Town has sub-councils, and I believe we're one of the only cities in South Africa who has the establishment of sub-councils. And so we decided we will host it, sub-council based meetings during the budget process, and that has substantially increased both the number of participants as well as the number of comments we received. Now, whether those comments are relevant in terms of the budget or not, that's a different issue. But what we have managed to do, we've managed to get or develop the culture of encouraging people to engage the city. We then obviously learned over the years that even though we have these engagements, these engagements aren't within a specific area, which makes it very difficult for people to attend those meetings. And so we provided transport. We found out later that that didn't work. And then we also realized that people don't really understand why they're at the meeting. They know that they need to be there. There's a budget, and they come there with their housing issues, with their pothole issues, but it's not necessarily budget related and more service delivery related. And so one can argue, yes, that service delivery is a budgetary method, but we would then say, well, we wanted you to come up with the projects. Tell us how we can enhance the services that impacts you. How can we, what type of projects do you need? Do you need a park? Do you need lights to be erected in a particular area? And so we try to break that information down for the public so they understand what is actually expected from them when they attend these engagements. Last year, the city then decided, so we're moving towards a more customer centricity approach where we want to take the focus of the citizens and look at how they want to be engaged with or how they could access the budget document. And so last year we asked the council, we went back to the sub-council based approach, but with the opportunity for council to say, well, we want additional engagements. We then received a substantial amount of comments. 1,817 people attended all the public meetings collectively, which was about 27 public meetings. Now, that's not a large number, but it is a large number in terms of the budget process for the mere fact that people have to leave their homes at night to attend these meetings. Then obviously we received a total amount of comments of 4,000 submissions, which basically we broke it down into various line departments. It came out to about 8,987 matters. So when I say 8,987 matters, that means that one person would submit a comment which relates to a host of various issues. It should also be noted that public participation is very it's based on people's current situation or current state or emotional distress at the particular time. For example, during the water crisis, we saw a large amount of comments coming in. We had received about 50,000 comments. Last year it was, we had totally different issue, obviously, and people were more concerned about the tariffs and the increases, and so they submitted comments, which was about 4,000 comments. And this year was quite interesting to see that a lot of people submitted comments regarding the COVID-19 matter, asking that government comes up with relief aid programs, that they do not reduce, increase, the rates and tariffs for the mere fact that people can no longer afford these tariffs, considering that a lot of people were left at home, forced to be at home during the COVID crisis. So it's quite interesting to see that the comments that you do receive during these processes are quite directly related to the current issues at hand, or the issues that people in the communities are actually suffering on. So last year what we did was we hosted the ward councillor engagements, which we were planning to do on a biannual basis, which calls for ward-based discussions with each ward councillor. And the city, as you know, has 116 wards. That's a large amount of wards that we needed to cover. So we hosted 116 engagements. In fact, we hosted a bit more than that to accommodate wards which were too large to cover in one engagement, making it easily accessible to the public. And we've realized that it allows us to be more direct focus as to what are the needs for that particular ward, that particular suburb, that particular community, and we're able to disseminate the information which is very focused. And while it wasn't as successful as we would have hoped, it was a trial run, and we did that within a period of 30 days. We thought that we would re-adopt that approach during the budget process for this year. So this year, we decided we will host 116 engagements right across the city, having a ward-based approach, one meeting per ward, allowing, once again, easily accessible to the community, and then breaking down that information very specifically for that particular ward. And I think that also answers the one question which Alaji, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, in the comment section. So the city had this grand idea for this year, hosting 116 engagements, going out to the community, informing the community through loud hailing, through pamphleteering, as we always do, putting up posters at the various spaza shops, putting it out into the newspaper, and utilizing various social platforms. That obviously all came to a stop when the president on the 15th of March announced that no contact engagements were allowed. So after the 15th, we then had to reassess and see how we would still proceed with our public participation process. But that was later changed again when they announced that we were not allowed, we were going under lockdown. So the city sat with a problem because a lot of its efforts for the budget process was contact engagement. It was us going out into the community, distributing the pamphlets, loud hailing, asking the community to come to a central place for that specific community to engage the city on its budget. And the budget obviously would then be broken down for that particular community, making the information simple, easy to understand, and very specific, so that you are able to discuss issues particularly concerning to your particular needs. So public participation had to go back to the drawing board, and we had to decide how we were going to engage the community through non-contact engagements. What we came up with was just how can I say, we aggressively communicated through platforms like Facebook. We put out notices on Facebook, we put out notices on Twitter. We had the adverts distributed through, I think it was 32 newspapers that we utilized across the city. And those are community-based newspapers, as well as obviously the broader newspaper, which is your Cape Argus, Die Burger. And so that would be the entire advert. It's a big, massive advert, which we published in all the newspapers right across the city. We then had the documents made available on our city's website. So every document pertaining to the budget was uploaded onto the city's website, where people could access that information and view it, because we were unable to go to sub-councils and libraries for viewing. We couldn't distribute information to the sub-councils as we traditionally do. We then also have an online comment form where people could submit their comments online. People could email the comments to us directly should they not wish to utilize the online comment form, and an email was created, which was a very generic email account which we use, which says budget.comments@capetown.gov.za. And we try to make things as simple and rememberable as easy, so people can remember it when they step away after reading an article. You know, okay, so budget.comments, that's where I need to send it off to. Then what we also did was we tried to put out as many media releases as possible. We put out about 3, and we've also tried to broaden the media coverage across the city, which led to 3 online articles being written about it. It led to 20 radio stations talking about it, and it also led to 23 newspaper articles being written about the budget. And so that was basically just to influence a neutral interface where the information would be taken from those media houses and further disseminated through the city. We then obviously, as we went on, we realized that the engagements were still too little. We then initiated additional communications through social media, which was once again, we republished the the Twitter and the Facebook notifications. We then went further and we designed a video explaining the budget and why it's important for people to participate, and we published that on YouTube. I'm not sure I can just have a look at what the statistical information on that video was. I'll just have to enter that later on. So we published it on YouTube, creating more accessibility so that people could access the information. We also realized that a lot of our ward councillors are key access points for their particular community, and a lot of them have social platforms like WhatsApp databases, Facebook groups, which they communicate, and also a lot of them have email databases as well. So what we did was we created little newsletters outlining the projects for each particular ward, and we sent those off to the ward councillors and asked them to further distribute that on their social platforms to the public, allowing for them obviously to receive the information and submit input to the city. We then also made use of the community organization databases at the various sub-councils. We have 24 sub-councils, and we send it through to the sub-council. That would be the advert, including a link to the documentation, and sub-councils will then obviously send that off to the community organizations registered on their database. And so we went extensively through all these approaches, and it's all digital approaches to encourage people to participate and inform them about the budget of the city. Now, if we look at the target of people we reached, we also sent out online, so the city has an online city news mailer where we've just sent out information, and of the information that we sent out, it was recorded that 4,114 of those newsletters were actually opened on email. It's interesting though, because a lot of people at the time were also at home, and people could either access these mailers through a hotspot or from a work PC. And in this case, a lot of people don't have that facility. So we also had to realize that that was one of the reasons why we needed to penetrate the community through other platforms like your mobile device. What we also realized though, even though we've extensively communicated and we have an estimated reach in the city of 952,000 people, which we've communicated with, or we've managed to reach them through the various platforms. We only received, let me just tell you, we received a very small number of people who actually submitted input. We received 228 submissions, and that was broken down to the various line departments addressing 733 issues. And so we sent that on to the line department. The line departments have provided responses, and that was drafted into a report, which we then sent on to council. And so it's quite interesting though, because a lot of the time we can actually evidently see when it has reached people. Like if you look at the Facebook statistics, we can see that it's reached people. We can see that some people has created an emoticon response more than actually typing out a response. We can see that on the mailer who has actually opened up their mail, so the information has definitely reached those people. But the city didn't really take an interest in actually submitting an input. And those that did submit comments, most of those comments were related to the COVID crisis. And so it's quite evident that when we have these face-to-face engagements, people are more willing to engage the city. And it's also more evident that when there's a pressing issue, that's what people actually bring up during the budget process. What we've learned from this exercise, though, is that it's a lot of encouragement and a lot of development on our side to go out and encourage our communities to participate on these digital platforms. The city has, the Public Participation Office is currently busy working on an app where we could put out our public participation processes to the public, but we want to be more transparent in how we manage the content or the responses. So what we want to do is we want to put out that comment, upload that comment as soon as you submit your comment, it will be uploaded so that others can actually see what the citizens are saying, and then obviously press like, or agree with the input or disagree with the input that another person has made. And that's a direction that we want to take. We also need to go and extensively engage the community on how to participate and why the need for participation is actually crucial. One of the things that we normally do in terms of the budget process, we have these ward councillor engagements where we go to the ward committees, and we try to educate them on the budget process as well as the importance to participate in the public participation processes, like the budget. And we've started that process just before COVID kicked in. And we've managed to host a few of them, but we didn't cover the entire city. Unfortunately, COVID put that to a stop. But in future, we would most definitely want to go back and start educating the community not the community, the ward committees, and then further disseminate that type of training through to the communities, so that the communities are also able to be educated on both the budget, understanding the budget, and then commenting on that particular budget. For us, the public participation process was fairly successful, in the sense that we've managed to reach a lot of people. It was a bit disappointing for us to receive the amount of comments that we have received, but the public participation in our field, we've realized that the numbers of comments we received is not an indicator of the success of the project, but rather an indicator of how we can obviously improve in terms of educating the public on why it's necessary to participate. Yes, I was also asked to talk about the council meeting. So as you know, the budget had to go through council, as it's legislatively required for the city to approve its budget by the end of May. And so the first budget meeting, the council meeting, the first Skype council meeting took place last month. And it was quite interesting. They took an entire month to plan that meeting. Our committee services was responsible for planning council's meetings. They, in consultation with the IT department, needed to overcome a few obstacles in order to have this meeting and host the first council meeting that has ever been hosted on Skype. So what they knew they needed a platform which allowed them to keep track of who attended their meetings, so to ensure that they have a quorum. They needed to have a voting system in place, so allow for councillors to vote on a topic which they are busy discussing and required approval. They needed to allow for people to present the reports as well as to speak while doing so. They needed to allow councillors to provide feedback and discussion. And they also needed to have the ability to record that entire engagement. And so a lot of this, because Skype generally in the city is not used as frequently as it should be or it could be. And a lot of times when we generally use Skype, it would be an engagement between one or two or more people. So with COVID obviously coming into place, the city has become more developed, or we've become more interested in engaging on the social platform. And I think that's one of the benefits of COVID. While COVID is a terrible thing, it has really changed the minds of the city and to become more tech savvy and become more responsive in a way. I mean, I was talking to a colleague today, we were discussing how accessible we are now. Previously, I would phone up a colleague and it would take ages for that person to be made available because she will have an overflowed diary, or she might be busy with something which wouldn't allow her to leave her workspace. Now you can easily access that, be accessible to that person's easily accessible. So what we realized was we needed to increase the infrastructure or improve the infrastructure to allow us to have this council meeting. Council, what committee services did was they did an assessment of the areas to see where these councils are situated, what are the connectivities or the strengths of the connectivities within those areas, and then liaised with MTN, who's one of the service providers, the key service providers for our 3G cards, liaised with them to increase or improve the connectivity in those key locations. We then also had to assess which councils had the equipment and which councils did not have the equipment. That would be a 3G card and a laptop, as well as a headset. It was found that obviously having a headset made the frequency or the sound frequency more adaptable. You could hear people more clear. There will be less noise, less background noise on the headset. And so they bought about 231 headsets and distributed those headsets to all the councillors. Then obviously the councillors needed to be trained, which they provide the training for. And that was basically just on how they would conduct those meetings, when councillors are able to speak, or how they should what the preferred way of commenting would be on a document. So we have a thing on Skype, like you have a thing on Zoom, which is your IM. It's your instant messaging, and that's on the right hand side, or the left hand side, I mean, of the screen. And people would obviously present the report. So you'll have a group of presenters and they will identify who those people are. So they are able to present, and then all the comments would be captured on the instant messaging side. They had a team of 5 people to manage this. And so some people would deal with the first phase was lobbying, dealing with the lobbying to ensure that the councillors were there, the numbers were sufficient to proceed with the engagement, and then also to ensure that there were no unnecessary people in that engagement, because that would obviously interfere with the infrastructure. Then from the lobbying, they would then obviously move over to managing the discussion, the chairperson obviously being the key speaker, and he would obviously provide an opportunity to speak. And the 5 people who managed the discussion would obviously manage what was being said in the IMs, and then referring to the speaker and saying, look, this is being said, can we address this issue? Can you respond where the response are needed? Then the voting system, which they needed to put into place, what they done was they created a SharePoint site. And on the SharePoint site, they created a voting app. And so for each key issue, they would copy that link. So when it came to a voting session, they will copy the link into the discussion. Councillors are then able to access that link, go into the voting system, and then vote. Now, there was some issue with connectivity. About 5 or 10 councillors might have gotten kicked out during the session and then had to re-enter, much like what's happening here. And that kind of just popped away, that link, because when you re-enter, the entire discussion was gone. And that meant that that councillor might not have had an opportunity to vote, which they then had to reinstate the link. So that was 1 or 2 of the ironing out issues which they've identified. So that dealt with the voting aspect, which we did via SharePoint. The Skype obviously allows for the engagement to be recorded. That covered that. And then the feedback, like I said, the comments, the back and forth discussion, most of that happened via the IM to limit the amount of speakers speaking at the same time through the mics. They also asked that people do not use their cameras. And what Committee Services is doing now for the next engagement, they've uploaded the photographs of each councillor, so that when councillors do speak, a photos appears instead of a camera, so that we could limit the data usage. And by limiting the data usage, we create a much bigger or faster internet, or smoother internet, I believe. So that's basically how they've managed those budget meetings. And
can you, sorry to interrupt. Can you wrap up? We're almost at the end of our time.
No, I'm done. That's basically how we've managed those budget meetings. I apologize. I know that I'm talking a bit longer than I should. Yeah, but so that's it in a nutshell from public participation in the city of Cape Town.
Okay, fantastic. I think we're very grateful for that input. I think that gave us a very realistic and detailed, practical insight into some of the and innovations that the city of Cape Town deployed. And clearly, it's quite obvious that this is a complex issue with lots of social aspects, lots of aspects around how do you manage infrastructure, IT, what investments do you make, what are the limits to technology, and how can you also be diverted into technology questions as opposed to dealing with the crux of the issue, which is building people's trust in public participation processes and actually reaching them. I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in the detail of what we've just heard. So thanks very much, Nathan. I think that was very rich. We're very grateful. So I just want to quickly go back to Ms. Motsvaleri. We had lost her early on in the meeting, and I don't want to finish off the panel.
We are losing you.
To just finish off her input and give us her final thoughts on what happened in her municipality over the last few weeks during the budget and IDP process. So Ms. Motsvaleri, if you are still with us and you would still want to make some final comments, please go ahead. Ms. Motswaledi, are you there? All right, we may have lost her again, which is unfortunate, but there isn't much we can do. We'll keep trying to bring her back into the meeting, but maybe let's proceed so long. So having heard a number of inputs from a variety of perspectives in local governments, from a number of municipalities who are sharing with us, the efforts that they've made, but also the challenges that they've encountered. For example, it's quite interesting to hear from the City of Cape Town, obviously with all the resources and the innovation that was put into it, still, a sort of a disappointing feedback, if I may summarize it. But also some interesting innovation coming through. For example, the sharing of comments, that the public participation becomes more transparent, that when comments are made, that everybody can see that comment. Those are simple innovations that can perhaps lend credibility to the process. However, there are also lots of practical considerations, realistic considerations that must be made in terms of how we see public participation in the IDP and the budget. And what are the limits? What are the limits of technology to reach people? How does one reach particularly the vulnerable and excluded communities? And technology may or may not help with that. How does the budget actually work, and how does the IDP actually work? And what is really up for discussion in an IDP and budget participation process? Sometimes the impression is created that everything is up for grabs, and the public participation process can turn the ship around. While sometimes municipalities will tell you, but actually the ship is already on course, and there are so many predetermined aspects to this IDP and this budget that we are limited in our room to maneuver. And of course, that must always be judged on its merits, but those are important considerations. I see a lot of comments coming through on the chat box, and please keep them coming. And I would like us to maybe see if we can enter into some bit more of a dialogue, and also bring in the civil society perspective, which has been coming through on the chat box, which is great. But I want to specifically now invite Ms. Nontando Ngamblana from Ephesus Core Plan in the Eastern Cape to maybe just give a few comments from her perspective on having listened to this. Perspectives from municipalities. What does it take from you as a representative of civil society on these matters? So, Nontando, if you are with us, and I believe you are, then the floor is yours for the next few minutes.
Good morning, colleagues on the platform, and thank you for the opportunity. I have been listening with intent and interest, and have also been following the comments on the chat, some very interesting ones. So I'm based in the Eastern Cape, and that is Ephesus Core Plan, the organization I work for, as part of a group of organizations around the country who are working on Asivikelane. Asivikelane is really just a campaign that we are engaged with, which we initiated just before, at the start of the lockdown. And really the essence and the intent behind it was to organize citizens who are less resilient, or in less resilient and poorly serviced communities, to be able to engage with the municipalities or their city governments on the state of service delivery in their particular communities, with COVID-19 at the back of our minds. And when we started in informal settlements, but we've since expanded into more than 150 communities that straddle urban, peri-urban, and rural parts of our country. And I mean, we released the findings of the, and I'd call it research for want of a better word, but I mean, this is research in the normal sense of the word. It's really just the amplification of citizen voice and the bringing together into community citizens who are in less serviced areas across the country. And if you haven't seen the results, feel free to either or get in touch with IBP or any of its partners, and you will have that. Now let me get to the heart of the conversation that we're having this morning. I think one of the first things that I'm quite disappointed about from all of the speakers that we've listened to is that we don't quite get a sense of what they deem to be good participation, right, in a context of a lockdown or virtual communication. What would they deem satisfactory engagement or satisfactory responses or inputs to the draft budget, right? Somebody on the chat group mentioned that there's a place in the Western Cape that's got about 5,000 residents. And if you've got 5% or even less of those commenting on the draft budget, that's considered satisfactory. And so I think as we engage in those Facebook platforms and social media and all sorts of various media and ICT platforms, getting out there to engage on the draft budgets, when we come back, what do we consider satisfactory responses or target? You know, just to get a sense of, in numbers, when you look at the population of a municipality, what's your target reach? I'm not getting that, right? So it seems to be a rather blanket approach. Let's get out there. And there doesn't seem to be even a targeted intent to reach the people who would ordinarily not have this kind of ICT infrastructure. And I mean, I like what was shared by the City of Cape Town on the video that they've developed, which simplifies the budget and is accessible, and one hopes that it's the kind of thing that you can even share on WhatsApp, because that's the other gap that we've noticed, right, is that when COVID-19 hit municipalities and the lockdown was announced, municipalities didn't have the kinds of technical capability to engage in the COVID world or even in the lockdown world. So they were not able to take the budget, the draft budget even, as they had it, and to convert it into palatable, accessible ways. I mean, videos, I don't know, infographics are just such kind of accessible ways in which ordinary citizens, because the budget language is quite technical, ways that people can engage with it, and then put it in platforms that were accessible. Even the stuff that was shared on community radio was quite technical, right? And never mind the fact that even before the lockdown, the manner in which we presented the budgets was not, there were huge gaps, let me put it like that, right? So we know that communities cannot influence all of the budget. There are only certain parts of the budget that are flexible enough for us to influence. And so that kind of information was not shared with us even before the lockdown, more so now. So you get this technical information thrown at you on a Facebook platform or on a website, and you're being asked to engage with it. And so I think it's that level of accessibility, creativity, innovation that citizens are asking for. And I'm not getting a sense that that's coming through from our speakers. Now back on Nasivikelane. So what we have been trying to do really is just to ask regularly citizens in a number of communities and areas what their lived reality has been like in the context of the lockdown. So do you have access to water right now? Clean drinking water? Has your communal ablution facility been cleaned? And that information we then make available to the city partners that we're working with, but it's also available to the public. And even in the budget and the municipal planning processes, one of the key challenges that we've noticed is that there hasn't been ease of integrating that information and that intelligence that's coming through with the set planning process of many municipalities. And I mean, Nasivikelane is just one. There possibly are many, many other innovative, useful ways in which civil society and others are collecting intelligence and service delivery information and the lived realities of communities who don't have access to the internet or don't have smartphones or don't have data, who are not able to participate in the budgeting processes in the manner that the municipality thinks that they will now. And we're not seeing that information being easily and effectively integrated in the municipal planning processes. And I think I'll leave it there for now as few comments. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nothando. I think that was very, very useful. A challenge thrown out to municipalities and to whoever's listening, that what is your actual target? What do you actually want to achieve with public participation? How do you want to reach those that are normally excluded from budget and decision-making processes? An important comment about the technical nature of the language that is used and the information that is produced, and that can actually work quite counterproductively. So it was also encouraging to hear from Councillor Johnson about the simplified version of the budget that was used to engage communities. I think we would like to throw it open a bit now and listen to some of the comments that people want to make. I first want to give an opportunity to maybe one of the panelists who still want to respond briefly to some of the comments made.
I'm available.
Yes, maybe a brief comment from you, but if we can keep it brief, because I also want to hear from the others in the audience. But please, Councillor Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've listened to Nothando very intensely, and I would like to assure Nothando that we will never ever be able to satisfy everyone, no matter what we do. And hence, we as the municipality, we agreed to put a very simplified version, 2-3 pager, just explaining the budget process, how you can influence, how it influences your life, where you are, what does it means for you to be able to participate, what does the money means that's coming in, how does it, where do we put it, where do we channel it, what is the purpose of all of this? Very simple, so that everybody in simple layman's terms can fully understand what is this animal that's called the budget and the IDP processes. Remember, we don't want to separate the budget from the IDP processes. And I fully agreed with the earlier statement that we intend to, we put so much focus more on budget processes, forgetting that the IDP process is much more meaningful, much more intense. So Nothando, irrespective of what we do, we will never ever be able to satisfy everybody. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Is there anyone else who wants to come in? Nathan, do you have a response?
Yeah, I just want to, if I may. I kind of agree with the previous speaker. However, I think that one cannot justify, or we can't use numbers as a means to determine whether or not a public participation was was a good process. It's like I said previously, so public participation in the city of Cape Town has never been a referendum. It's never been a matter of a number of yeses and a number of no's. It was always based on the merit. Now, with the budget process, obviously, it's not a matter of I support or I don't support, because there's a whole array of things that people need to comment on. And so what we've always tried to do is we've tried to look at the comments and see whether or not people understand what they're actually commenting on, because I think that's where the first part comes in. So for the public participation unit, we have very specific things that we look at in terms of determining whether our process is actually a meaningful process, because that's what we look for. We look for meaningful processes rather than successful processes. And when I say meaningful, did we reach the people? Number one, have we gone through every possible channel to ensure that from the people in the most affluent areas to the people in the most poorest areas who do not have the same access to the same technology or the same access to the same building, for example, where comments can be submitted or engagements, have we considered everybody in this approach in our communication strategy? Which is why I said in the beginning, we traditionally used to do a tick box exercise and we moved to 116 engagements. Now, obviously with the non-contact approach, it will be us, the city of Cape Town, implementing a budget process which is against the regulations, which then means that we're infringing on the laws, which then means that we are basically we're breaking laws. And so our hands were very tied and very limited to how we could engage. Unfortunately, digital was the only manner. The problem with digital is that not everybody does have, like the previous speaker said, rightfully, not everybody in the city or everybody in the country has access to those digital platforms. So for us, it's normally, okay, so you've now managed to reach the people. You have 116 engagements, you go out, you do loud hailing, you go out, you do distributions of pamphlets, you target organizations through community databases, you target the ward councils, you get their assistance in mobilizing the community, you put it out in the newspaper, we put it out on the website. We've gone through a rigorous communication strategy or approach. However, the information that we're sharing with you, do you actually understand what we're asking of you, what you need to be doing? And number three, do you actually understand what you're reading? And so the city has taken, by breaking it up into smaller groups who are able to customize that information based on that specific budget assignment. And in most cases, this would be your ward allocation. And then obviously we have the overall budget as well in a presentation. And this presentation we built down into tables so that you could easily understand what it is. Instead of having all the narrative, instead of having all this complicated tables which you don't understand, we take out the key information which resonates with that resident. Then we tell them this is what the projects are for your particular area. This is how your area would benefit. So when we're building a park, we explain to you what we want to build there, what we're proposing. And all of this information comes from previous concerns and issues which were raised by that particular community. And so we also put up pictorial information where we say, okay, we'll have for example, in the water crisis, we had pictorial information where we showed how many liters of water and are collected and how much liters of water are used. And this is all demonstrated in infographics. I think that's what they call it. So we try to break the information down in the most simplest form so that anybody is able to pick up that information and read it and understand it and make comment on it. So if we have reached you and you've understood what we've asked, and then accessibility, you can access that information, but you can also submit comments through a host of channels, then in public participation's view, we have had a meaningful engagement with the public. And that's how we based our successes. Now, I come back to the number issue, and this is why I say the numbers don't matter. Not that it doesn't matter, but it's not a key indicator for the mere fact that we put out a budget process, for example, and a budget might impact a certain group of people. It impacts everybody, but a certain group of people might have a bigger interest in it, where others might not have that interest. We put out the budget process and more people are concerned about housing, and then they are concerned about let's talk about a tariff increase. So you got different people that has different needs and different issues that they need to raise. And because of that, it depends on what we're putting out there that sparks that interest, that then encourages you to submit an actual comment. So we can look at the numbers, we say, well, we can evidently see that we send out newsletters, 4,000 people actually opened up that newsletter. But did it spark an interest for you to submit a comment to the city? And so we then obviously need to go back and reevaluate, why didn't you participate? And so we learn. But if we look at the water crisis, people submitted a lot of comments because there was something for them that sparked an interest for them to submit a comment. And so different processes, you'll have a public participation process which gets one comment and one that gets 50,000. But that's basically topical because of the interest, the individual's interest.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nathan. Very interesting points being made about how to reach, how to access, how to make it possible. Obviously, the follow-up question is also, I think, being posed in the chat box about, so what then? Eh? What happens with all the information that you have collected and have been able to reach out and collect information, and how is it actually used in further policy decision-making? And I think that's perhaps an even more complicated issue, but extremely important in the end. That is what public participation is all about. So let's throw it into the audience. Is there anyone who wants to make a comment? Now, of course, we have a lot of people gathered here today. So if you can indicate by raising your hand whether you want the floor, then I can hopefully see that on my chat or on my right-hand side. I don't see any. I see Lefa Mokanya. Please go ahead and make your input and keep it as short as you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I just want to put my input on the presentation. It's very nice to learn from other countries how are they dealing with the issues of local government. And I so wish my country could learn things from you guys. As much as we are a small country here in Lesotho, but we are struggling with the public participation, especially when it comes to the budget. There are issues that are not presented and the nation is not satisfied with it. As you have seen, our latest current affairs, we have become not the good nation when it comes to the government issues. All I want to say is, well done in South Africa. You guys, we are gonna learn a lot, and Africa is going to be a good country in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lefa. Those are very encouraging words. Thank you very much. I'm going to quickly turn to Damaris and then Samuel, because I see they have their hands up. So Damaris, over to you, and then after that, Samuel.
Thank you, Prof. I'm from the Community Engagement Unit at UWC, and I work in communities, and specifically rural communities. So I've worked in the Langeberg municipality around the IDP process. And what is said on paper is not always a true reflection of what communities sense and feel. Just in January, when I did some training in the Montague community, I had 50 young people in one room. No one has ever seen an IDP document. So for me, when we talk about budgeting an IDP, because the IDP needs to speak to the budget, and many times that is not a true reality, because you have a budget set up, but the priorities of the community are not met. And so we need to look at how are we going to merge the two, where your IDP and your community needs directly speak to the budget process. Then in the city of Cape Town, I mean, just the other day, the sub-council managers put out notification, but it only went to the registered NGOs in the sub-council. it did not go to people that are not on the database. So clearly something somewhere is not adding up and people are not really being acknowledged for the work they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask Samuel to make a brief input? He had his hand up. Samuel Adelekatayo, any input from you? If not, I'll move over to, I saw Frans Rothman also had his hand up earlier. Frans, do you want to make an input?
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah, thanks for this.
Yeah.
Remember, I'm an accountant by training, so I'm thinking more in terms of practical things. The rules of order that was mentioned that has been changed to accommodate virtual meetings, and that Solga's actually sort of indicated or guided on that. So my first question is, and I see it has been raised in this virtual meeting in Rustenburg, and the critical thing there is, does those rules of order, or is there a need to promulgate them? And if not promulgated, can you actually enforce it? Because unfortunately, when there's politics at play, some people want to sort of overrule some of this stuff. The other thing that I just want to, and the CFO from Bahrain has actually mentioned it. My take is there is no such thing as a draft budget, and I think we have to root it out in local government, because my experience is that because we refer to the table budget as a draft budget, councillors and even officials at local municipalities think, no, it's just a draft. It can be amended and changed at will. And that actually nullifies the whole purpose of public participation, because very few municipalities that I'm aware of actually come back with their budget after they've amended it and then ask the public input on the amended budget. Unfortunately, and I want to close with that, is that my understanding of public participation in local government is merely a tick of the box exercise. And I think in this instance, it is of particular importance. One of the speakers, I think from Cape Town, has mentioned, and I think you also alluded to it, is that to open it up so that people can actually see what others are commenting, because especially now we would not know, because there is social distancing and there is no public meeting, so we would not know what other people have done. Some municipalities do not share, and the last thing is, what do we define by consideration? I think that is of critical importance. So we can submit the input, but should we as a public not be in a position that we can insist on the council giving feedback to us? Otherwise, it's actually an exercise where officials at municipalities decide whether this is relevant input or not. And my take is, you are commenting on the IDP and the budget for the council, not for officials to take a decision. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frans. Let me go straight to Tina Nzo. I'm trying to make up some time here. Tina, you had your hand up. Please make your input.
Thank you very much, Sharp. I would like to just pose a short question, or should I say a food for thought, particularly to councillors, and also taking into consideration the inputs that were made by non-kind of representing the civil society organizations. This speaks to the understanding that municipalities have actually come to an auditing process of the audit cycle of 2018-19. And it also speaks to issues of budgets and the money that has been spent by municipalities. So right now we know that we are faced with precarious conditions under COVID-19, where some municipalities are struggling when it comes to their transparency and processes of budgeting. And this will really lead to having a much more inclusive mode of auditing the way in which municipalities have actually spent on their capital budgets and also their expenditures. So here, the food for thought is that maybe it's about time that we also start thinking about bringing in civil society organizations to be more proactive in conducting social audits for the purposes of monitoring the municipality's expenditure and also when it comes to their capital projects. And here we will need civil society to be more active in terms of participating in these social audits. And Nontando, as a representative of civil society organizations, maybe this is something that you can start thinking of in terms of building capacity so that we can get a much more better internal looking into the way in which municipalities are spending their budgets, especially under these precarious times. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mzo. Very useful input there. We have a few more minutes left. If there's anyone who wants to come in at the tail end of the discussion and make further input, please raise your hand. And I'm particularly interested to hear, further ideas. What ideas are there to solve some of these conundrums that we have? The limits to technology, the straitjackets that municipalities are in when it comes to budgeting, the challenge of reaching the excluded communities. Ryan Fester, I see you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thanks for that. Listening to the conversation, especially from Nathan Fisher, I work with many communities here in Cape Town. And I have to say that the problem, I think, is that the time the budget is released to the public, it has already been formulated, and that's the issue, because meaningful participation is not whether people have access to the budget or understand it, because most people will never understand the budget really, even for more professionalized and seasoned professionals. When you look at that budget and the size of it, it's quite a heavy document to go through. But meaningful participation, I believe, is when you allow the public to be part of the formulation phase. Otherwise, you're really just asking the public to rubber stamp the process and be compliant, or for the city to be compliant. So yeah, that's my issue, is I don't think meaningful participation is really having meetings. It's really about whether you allow the public to be part of the process when the budget is formulated, and not towards the tail end where the budget is tabled and needs to be accepted. Thanks.
Thanks. I think that's a very important input. Obviously not diminishing the importance of the huge effort that needs to be put into reaching out and creating access and making accessible. Those things are hugely important, because without that, you cannot move to the second layer of the complexity, which is to really make it meaningful and have impact. But I don't know whether there are any other comments. I mean, I'm intrigued by a comment that Johan Mettler made. He's also in this meeting. He's the city manager of Nelson Mandela Bay, and obviously can comment on this, from his perspective as being responsible for producing a budget and experiencing also the constraints of it. I don't know, Johan, whether you can maybe elaborate on the point that you made about what are the choices that can actually be put to communities in this particular phase of public participation. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I think you're used to that. Johan, are you with us?
Yes. No. I'm quite used to be put on the spot. Comes with the territory. Look, I think, and as a point that I've made earlier, also in discussions with my colleagues at Ephesus, and that is that often our communities are not told what are your options here. We need to prioritize. What are the options? So it's a question around funding. What is available for this financial year that we are talking about that we can actually play around with? And normally when you attend IDP meetings, and Councillor Johnson will, I know this, is that besides the fact that you get shouted at, it's the social and economic infrastructure and the backlogs in terms of that infrastructure that really come up mostly in those kind of meetings. And people would want to know, what are you going to do about the parks, about the bus shelters, about the clinics, libraries, the roads, the tarred or the gravel roads. And I think there needs to be a bit of honesty also on the side of municipalities to say, this is what we have. We are currently spending on social infrastructure a mere 5%, as opposed to the 85% on basic infrastructure. And we want to increase that. And here are the projects, and what are the projects that you think we should prioritize? And then over a period, say, we actually want to spend up to 10% or 15% on social and economic infrastructure. And then take your community along with you. And we managed to do that to a certain extent at Drakensberg a few years ago, but I can tell you it's very difficult within a metro, simply just because the backlogs are just astronomical. But I think that is where one should start, so that people don't have to think of it merely as a tick box, that you can actually measure that which we have promised. Anyway, I want to keep it as short as that. Thanks for the opportunity.
Great, thanks, Johan. I think we are over time, so we have to start wrapping up. I also worry that at some point even Zoom may kick us out altogether. So if that happens, don't despair. We've had an extremely useful discussion, but there are still a few people who want to come in. I see Owen Witbooi, but can you keep it very, very brief, because we are running out of time. Owen Witbooi, over to you.
Yep, Owen Witbooi here from Gauteng Treasury. I listened to the discussion obviously quite intently. I think being a practitioner in the field and seeing what municipalities are doing, the key issue that emerges to me when I look at the budgets that are being tabled now, the quick shift, we see a quick shift, yes, in terms of the online medium, but the shift in terms of budgets towards COVID-19 related focus, and that is not coming very strongly through in terms of the IDP reviews, the budgets, and even obviously the SDBIP's outflow of the budgets. So that for me is a real concern. And I think also when you look at the special adjustment budgets that municipalities are producing now, how genuinely are they COVID-19 related? Although in law, they've been allowed permission to promulgate these. So here are going to be some very interesting scenarios in terms of the spending and focus of municipalities in terms of COVID-19. I've got some others, but let me leave it at that. I just wanted to make the point about COVID-19 and municipalities making a shift orientation towards that. Thanks.
Thank you. We have to wrap up the meeting, but I see Councillor Johnson, you have a last comment to make. Please make it brief. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I just want to briefly explain to the collective that this is the most complex sector that you can get, the most highly regulated sector on the continent of Africa. We are only receiving 4% of the fiscus, the budget, 4%, yet we are expected to be the cold face of service delivery right in the face of the community. We are government, we must be the one servicing that road, giving electricity, and we are only receiving 4% of the fiscus. It's being put up to 9% by your conditional grants, and yet provinces and national, they are all cash funded, and local government is not cash funded. So we need to critically overall this local government sector. Prof, are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry, I was just briefly distracted. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I was just got a call just to find out that Ms. Motswaledi is back, and she really wants to make an input. So I'm going to quickly hand over to Ms. Motswaledi. It's good to have you back. Please, please, your input, ma'am.
As like Mahare municipality, we didn't follow the process to the latter, of which we might get an exception or a finding by Auditor General of non-compliance. And then what I would like to share with the House is that some municipalities like Mahare municipality, it's a very small municipality with a high rate of unemployment. And then with a collection rate of 30%. And after the lockdown have been introduced, our collection rate have dropped to 8%. So it is a real struggling municipality. And then we have challenges with regard to some other connections like virtual that we have to implement because we don't have cash in order to fund those virtual connections. And with regard to the COVID-19, what I can just give briefly to the House is that this COVID-19, it posed the municipality with a challenge of unfunded mandate because we had to fund the COVID-19 requirements without it being budgeted for. So that is now that we are going to compile the special adjustment budget in order for the line item of the COVID-19 to reflect in our budget and also to be reported to the council. So for the municipality like Mahareng, it is very challenging. And like I've mentioned earlier, like the implementation of the visual connections, it's still a challenge to us due to the fact that we have old ICT infrastructures and then like the collection rate that I have alluded to. And as Councillor Johnson have indicated, like we as local government, we are not cash funded. So we are expected to collect from the community that they are not working. So it is very difficult and it is very challenging for us to service some other needs of the community. What I can just maybe recommend is that maybe going forward, after all the challenges with regard to the visual connections have been resolved, I think that will be a good way to conduct our meetings. And then with regard to the public participations, like I've indicated that what we have identified as a municipality was that there are gaps that we have identified, like making use of, we are not making use of, or like information sharing, we are not making use of social medias to communicate the information with the community. So I think going forward as a municipality, what we are going to put more attention to is how we are going to share the information with the community, like using of the flyers, like using the social medias, like using those the radios, so that the information can reach the community in time. And furthermore, as Mahare municipality, because we've encountered those challenges, we need to go to the drawing board, and then we need to start to be proactive. Like, for example, there's no need for us to wait for the 31st of March for the draft budget to be adopted by council. We can even adopt it before the 31st of March. So should we have been proactive, I think some of the challenges with regard to the public participation would have been resolved, and then we would have not have the challenges that we are encountering right now. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Motsoaledi. It was great to have you back. Thanks for those inputs. I also want to thank our other panelists. Councillor Johnson, thank you very, very much for your inputs. And Nathan Fisher from the City of Cape Town, terrific, fantastic inputs, really useful. Of course, you know, we're not ticking all the boxes. We're not able to solve the problems here. There's lots of challenges, lots of concerns, lots of critique, but that's the beauty of our democracy. It will only make us function better, and we need to improve. Clearly, there's a lot of concern still in the way we conduct public participation, how we make it meaningful, how do we have it make impact on budgets, but some really interesting exchange of ideas. I'm really grateful to the three of you for making time available out of your busy schedules to be part of us. Also, thanks to Tanash for making the input at the beginning, giving the overview. I also want to thank our partners, the International Budget Partnership, Albert van Zyl and his colleagues. Thank you so much for your support and your engagement. We will publish some reflections on this meeting and on this process, so please stay tuned into this project, Ashivikilane, as well as the broader debate on responsive budgeting and public participation in transparency during COVID-19. So thanks, IBP. Also, thanks to all of you participants. It's amazing to have so many meetings, so many people in the meeting, and you were all super disciplined, yet very engaging and critical in the chat box and in your comments. So I'm really grateful that you helped me to have this meeting so productively. Thank you very much. And then I think maybe the last word should be Selga's as the co-host of this meeting. Khalil, are you still with us? Can you maybe?
Yes, Prof, I'm here, and thanks very much. Thanks to the partnership with the Dalla Umar Institute, and thanks also to the 3 municipalities. Just a quick comment. I think it was probably easier to overcome the challenges of COVID-19 when it comes to regulatory requirements of approving the IDP and budget. But I think just reading the conversations and the input, we probably need a series of webinars on public participation. And maybe that's something we should consider, because I think on one hand, we hear about reaching the targets, it's satisfactory, disappointing, but on the other hand, is it meaningful and effective from advocacy groups and NGOs and communities? So we probably need a series of webinars, and public participation is not an old debate. It's been there before COVID-19, and I think we need to find that balance. As Johan Mettler also pointed out, it's not as easy. So just the parting point is that maybe we should consider a series on public participation in IDPs and budgets.
Most certainly, I think that's a great idea. It was great to bring these perspectives together, civil society, local government, academics. I think it's been very useful. I thank all of you for your participation, and we will capture everything. The comments will also be kept. The recording will be published, so the wisdom that we shared this morning will not be lost on us. So thank you very much, and hope to see you again, and have a nice day. Thank you.